Batman and Robin always make for a legendary team and are also referred to as the Cape Crusaders or the dynamic duo. Robin is Batman's most popular sidekick, and very few fans know about Duke Thomas, who was one of Batman's lesser-known companions. Thomas was first introduced in the Batman comics in 2013 and was created by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. He initially led the We Are Robin movement that protected Gotham in Batman's absence, and he later even became a part of the Batman family as a metahuman named Signal. Today, we will explore Duke Thomas's storyline right from his origins to his adventures with Batman and tell you everything about him. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Exploring the origins of Duke Thomas. Duke Thomas was the son of a social worker named Elaine Thomas and a mysterious villain named Noman. Elaine had moved to Gotham while she was pregnant with Duke, as she wanted to get away from Noman and any secret wars that were going on among the Immortals. She then became a social worker and even married a construction worker named Doug Thomas. The Thomas family lived in Tracy Towers in the Gotham Narrows, and Duke grew up without being aware of his mother's past. Duke Thomas first appeared in the Batman comics number 21 after the New 52 reboot. In this comic issue titled Secret City Part 1, Duke Thomas was a young child when Gotham suffered devastating losses due to flooding in the subway systems. Duke was trying to survive by catching fish that were swimming across these subway tunnels, but he ended up encountering a criminal gang. While Duke managed to find one fish, he did not know how to face these criminals, and he started running to escape them. He came across Batman, who got rid of these criminals and returned his fish to him. Duke later appeared in the Batman comics 30 in an issue titled Savage City Part 1. This issue was set during the 0-year story arc, wherein the Riddler hatched an elaborate scheme and successfully took control of Gotham in Batman's absence. While the Riddler was terrorizing the citizens of Gotham, Batman had suffered an attack during the onset of Hurricane Renee and was unconscious for months. Duke Thomas's family had rescued him, and the young boy was taking care of Bruce Wayne at their apartment. When Batman finally regains consciousness, he realizes that he's in a strange apartment and finds Duke in the living room. When Duke solves a bunch of riddles, he tells Bruce that they are in the Bell Towers, which is the residence of the Thomas family. Duke further tells Bruce that he has been unconscious since New Year's and that many things have happened ever since. Bruce learns about the Riddler's menace and takes his leave in order to deal with the villain before things worsen. Bruce even asks Duke to come along, but the young boy refuses his offer and states that he needs to defeat the Riddler. The villain had promised to stop terrorizing the citizens of Gotham if only someone presented him with a riddle he could not answer, and Duke intended to challenge the Riddler with one of his riddles. After a few years, Duke appeared in the Batman Endgame story arc, which marked the Joker's return to Gotham after many years. The Joker had kidnapped Duke's entire family, and he intended to recreate Bruce's parents' murder by killing Duke's parents in front of Bruce. While Batman managed to rescue Duke from the Joker's grasp, he failed to save the rest of the Thomas family. Duke's parents allegedly died after being exposed to the Joker's mind-controlling gas, and Batman then decided to leave Duke with Julia Pennyworth before finally facing the Joker again. The story of him becoming a Robin. After Duke's parents disappeared during the Batman Endgame story, he was placed in the foster care system of Gotham City. While he was a bright young man, he soon started behaving delinquently and even got in trouble with the police. Duke was then placed under the care of Dr. Leslie Tompkins, who tries to convince him to behave well by reassuring him that the police are looking into his parents' disappearances. She tells him that the police found some of Joker's victims floating around the sewer system, and then introduces him to his new foster parents, Joanne and Roy Dawson. As Duke enters the Dawson's home, his new foster mom shows him around the place and tells him about all the chores she expects him to do. She soon leaves him alone, and Duke immediately takes this opportunity to escape through the window. He heads towards the sewers to look for his parents and feels sad as he thinks about his mother's fate. While looking around the sewers, Duke ends up stumbling into an underground meeting where a group of homeless people is trying to plan a few bomb explosions across the city. He gets caught while he eavesdrops on their conversation, but the Robins come to his rescue and he eventually ends up joining their group. Exploring the interesting We Are Robin story arc. We Are Robin was a comic series that was first released in 2015, and it had a total of 12 issues. The first issue explores Duke's backstory as he gets in trouble with the police and ends up in Leslie Tompkins' office. After Leslie introduces Duke to his new foster family, he runs away and ends up in a subway network. Here, he comes across a group of homeless people planning explosions around the city. They have created an entire city underground and intend to make the above-grounders pay for being inconsiderate toward the homeless. They talk about the explosions around famous city landmarks and even decide to start with the Hall of Records. When Duke gets discovered by these people, the Robins come to his defense while their leader, the Nest, watches the scene from afar. In the next issue, Duke fights these homeless people along with the Robins, who are part of the We Are Robin movement. One of the Robins, named Rico, lights up a flame to scare their opponents, and the Robins easily escape the situation. Duke almost flees with the Robins when someone hits him on the head and he falls unconscious. They run through a manhole, but the Robins receive a mysterious order from the Nest and are asked to leave the site immediately. Duke regains consciousness and finds himself in a police station where a man asks him if he's willing to do anything to find his parents. The man also asks Duke if he would bomb the city with the underground army to find his parents, but Duke refuses this offer. He retorts by saying that finding his parents was the police's job, and the man leaves the room without any comments. Duke realizes that the room's door is unlocked, and he steps out and sees that he's not in the police station but instead in an abandoned warehouse. He then spots a parked motorcycle with a red biker jacket lying on the bike seat. The jacket had an initial R on it, and a cell phone was beeping in the jacket's pocket. This cell phone gives him directions to the Robins' meeting place, and Duke becomes a Robin when he decides to wear their jacket and head to this meeting place. The Robins are sitting on a rooftop when Duke shows up there, and they don't seem to be aware of the fact that they were supposed to meet Duke there. Neither Duke nor the Robins knew who arranged for them to meet, but they decided to work together to get rid of the underground homeless army. Duke shares the homeless army's plans with the Robins and tells them that the homeless were first planning on bombing the Hall of Records. They head to the place and find one bomb, while the Nest video surveillance keeps an eye on the underground army's leader and learns that he's just a puppet working for a greater force of evil. In the third issue, the Robins split into two teams, and they also discover another bomb in the electrical room. They try to find a way to defuse the bomb when they receive a message from the Nest with specific instructions to cut the plastic cover of the blue wire attached to the bomb. The team also receives information about a fight that has broken out between the homeless people and some of the other Robins who are trying to stop the riot. All the Robins receive an order to help de-escalate the fight above ground, while Dax, Dre, and the other Robins try to defuse one of the bombs. Dax hesitates to cut the bomb's wires, but he finally cuts them and the bomb successfully diffuses. They head to the site of the other bomb, where another Robin named the Troy Wonder is still trying to defuse the bomb. They then receive a message from the Nest that tells them to board the next carriage train, and all of them follow this order except Troy, who stays back to get rid of the bomb. As their train starts moving, the Robins try to convince Troy to get on the train, but he refuses to let the enemies win and ends up dying on the bomb explosion. Back at the Nest base, we learn that Alfred Pennyworth had been leading the Robins in secret, and he also mourns Troy's death. The next issue, titled Role Model 4, primarily focuses on Rico as she tries to process her feelings after Troy's death. In the meantime, the other Robins also take some time to recover from their friend's death. The fifth issue of this series was titled Sibling Rivalry, and it began with the underground army's preacher and his attempts to recruit more homeless people to fight for him. While the preacher earnestly does his job, his leader shows up from behind and informs him that this quest is over. The preacher's leader was a Talon, one of the many assassins who work for the Distinguished Court of Owls organization. In the meantime, one of the Robins, named Rabina, works as a waitress in a restaurant when a man named Hector Ortiz orders her to get him some food. Hector tries to threaten Rabina when she refuses to give him the food, and he also sneaks up on her and tries to attack her outside the restaurant. While Rabina knocks him down, the Robins, including Duke Thomas and Rico, show up and try to help her. Rabina tells them that Hector is her brother, and the Robins later decide to meet to talk about Troy's death. During the meeting, Rico starts talking about how they are even bigger than Batman and they should get out there and do more for the city, while the vigilante seems to have disappeared. While Alfred Pennyworth watches them from afar, he decides to send them some arsenal, and they soon receive an entire truck loaded with weapons and equipment. Alfred also sends them a message telling them that he chose them for a reason and is hopeful that they will continue to serve the city as Robins. While Duke, Rico, and Rabina walk back from the meeting, Rabina tells them about Hector's abusive nature. She tells them that her brother's gang broke her ribs and jaw and even injured her head, but her mother forced her not to report the incident. Just while Robina shares her traumatic story, Hector and his gang appear in a car and attack them with guns, and Duke ends up getting a gunshot wound. The Talon watches the scene from afar and he orchestrates a car crash that kills Hector. The Talon then appears in the middle of the street and refers to the Robins as the children of the night who now have a new father. He also promises to show them how to deliver true justice as this issue comes to an end. In the 6th issue, Duke Thomas and the other Robins recover from Hector's attack and get back on their feet. The Talon declares that he intends to make soldiers out of the Robins and that they will usher Gotham into a future free of corruption. Rico and Duke both try to attack the Talon, but Rico ends up getting defeated and the police soon arrive at the scene. Duke also struggles to fight against the Talon, while Robina finds a gun and tries to avenge her brother's death by shooting a bullet at the Talon. While the Talon encourages her to shoot, the police and media arrive on the scene and the true identities of the 3 Robins end up getting revealed to the world. However, this proves to be of some help as the other Robins such as Dax and Dre figure out that their team needs help and rush to the scene. All 5 of the Robins unite to fight against the Talon together, and they even manage to keep him down for a short period of time. The Talon especially focuses on Dre when Alfred Pennyworth finally shows up at the scene in the disguise of the Nest. He appears in a military vehicle and orders the Robins to immediately get inside before the police catch them. They rush away from the scene of Hector's death, but the Robins have a hard time trusting the Nest. Alfred soon blows up the truck to get rid of any evidence and leaves the Robins in the middle of the street once they get far from the scene. Pennyworth also advises the Robins to start wearing masks for their own safety. The next issue was titled Jailbird 7, and it began with Jim Gordon and Dick Grayson reminiscing about their past days when Batman first took on a sidekick. They also learn that the councilwoman Noctura has teamed up with the Court of Owls, and Dick decides to pay her a visit. As the scene shifts to Duke and the other Robins, we learn that they have all been captured and imprisoned by the Court of Owls. They refer to this prison as the Cage, and the court also drags Jason Todd and Tim Drake to this cage. Jason was the Red Hood while Tim was the Red Robin, and the Court of Owls orders the two to fight until only one survives. The two of them don't get along well, but it seems that they had planned this fight so that they could free the Robins. Jason flings Tim across the room towards the control panels that can unlock the cages, and Tim then sets the Robins free. Duke, Damian, and the other Robins immediately rush to the roof to escape the place, while Tim and Jason fight the Talons and the Court of Owls. While the Robins safely get to the roof, things don't work out exactly as planned as they face some Talons who had been stationed on the rooftop. The next issue begins with an introduction for Johnny Bender, who later turns out to be the main villain in this comic series. Johnny had a deformed smile on his face due to a plastic surgery gone wrong, and he then started going by the name Smiley. Moreover, Johnny idolizes the Joker and is obsessed with the villain and everything he has done. In a different part of the city, Duke decides to look for his parents again, and he heads to a psychiatric hospital in order to search for them. All the Robins decide to disband and head their ways after facing the Talons and the Court of Owls, and they look for new things to find meaning in life. While Duke starts searching for his parents again, Rico contemplates confessing her feelings for Duke, while Dax tries to build a gun and Robina mourns her brother's death. While the Robins keep themselves busy, mysterious figures keep an eye on them and their actions. The story continues in a parallel wherein Johnny Bender kills his parents after getting into an argument with them, while Duke reunites with his parents at a psychiatric ward. However, Duke's parents have been horribly affected by the Joker's toxins and they don't seem to be in any condition to speak. In the 9th issue of the comics, Johnny Bender, also known as Smiley, stirs up trouble in Gotham and starts gathering an army of followers. In the meantime, the Robins wonder if they should come back together or continue to ignore his attacks. Duke believes that he has failed his parents, and he also feels sad over the fact that they cannot even recognize him. He ends up running into Robina, also known as Izzy, and the two have a heartwarming reunion and decide to catch up. Duke tells Izzy about his parents, and Izzy tells him about Dre and Dax, who are also preoccupied with their issues. In the meantime, Rico spots the two walking together, and she assumes that they are going out together. Meanwhile, Dre keeps track of Smiley's crimes and tries to track him down on his own. As this issue comes to an end, Smiley ends up in a face-off against one of the Talons, who effortlessly manages to defeat the villain. In the 10th issue of the comics, Smiley decides to perform at a comedy club, but his act soon takes a dark turn as he starts killing people at the show. His clan of supporters starts recording these killings, and the entire incident soon goes viral around the city, and citizens begin to panic. In the meantime, Duke continues to care for his parents, even though they don't show any improvement improvement and still fail to recognize their son. Izzy also resumes working at the diner while Dax pays a visit to Dre to catch up. Dre declares that he will act solo going forward, and he soon learns about the incident at the comedy club. He runs into a few of Smiley's minions and decides to infiltrate them as they will lead him to Smiley. In the meantime, Smiley decides to attack Middletown High School, which also happens to be Rico and Duke's high school. Dre also gets access to Smiley's base and he informs Dax, who is quite concerned for his friend. Dax sends a message to the other Robins to tell them about Dre's plans. Meanwhile, Duke tries to talk to Rico about the whole situation at school when Smiley finally breaks into the school and declares an attack. In the next issue, number 11, Duke and Rico try to devise an escape plan and they also contact the other Robins. While Dax tries to reach Izzy and inform her about Smiley's attack on the school, she does not check her phone and rushes to school in a hurry. Back at the school, Rico and Duke protect the other kids from Smiley's followers while the school's principal tries to reason with the villain. Smiley then leads all the teachers to the 5th floor while Duke and Rico finally receive a message from Dax. Rico tells Duke that Dax is on his way to help them, and she also checks her phone and realizes that the entire situation has made it to the news. Soon, Gotham City police surround the school and order the Jokers to surrender and leave the school. In the meantime, Smiley decides to punish the teachers while Dax and Izzy try to break into the school on their own. Pennyworth orders them to let the police handle the situation and even tells them to refrain from taking any action at the school. While the Jokers terrorize the students, Dre walks around the school in disguise and finally runs into the other Robins. He holds a gun in his hand and all the Robins come together to fight the Jokers and de-escalate the situation. They all get their hands on some weapons and Duke especially takes the lead in the battle against Smiley. They manage to capture him and the police finally show up and take care of the rest of the situation. Duke and the Robins also realize that they are fighting for good and that they are the future of Gotham. Meanwhile, the news covers the school break-in and identifies Smiley as the teenage boy named Johnny Bender who had recently killed his parents. As this issue ends, the Robins meet Alfred Pennyworth, who is still in his disguise, and Duke declares that the Robins will no longer work for him. Instead, they decide to work according to their own rules and state that they will figure out a way for themselves on their own. The final issue, titled The Hero Business, starts on a good note as the Robins once again reunite and work together as a team. However, a problem soon arises when a former Robin named Cisco decides to go on a mission to rob Bruce Wayne after his family gets into financial trouble because of Bruce Wayne. Before going on this mission, Cisco leaves a message for Suge R on the Robins network wherein he tells her that he has no option but to carry out this mission. Suge R gathers the other Robins and tells them about Cisco and they all decide to stop the robbery. However, Alfred Pennyworth shows up at the scene and the two of the robbers try to kidnap him. The Robins eventually save Alfred by negotiating with the robbers and the butler then tells the Robins that he does not know who they are. However, Alfred states that Bruce Wayne will be pleased to hear about how they handled the situation. Duke then reveals that he knows that Alfred has been acting as the Nest all along, and Alfred finally accepts his role in bringing them together. The series ends on a good note as the Robins head out of the building, and the narrator talks about how it's everyone's duty to make the world a better place. Duke Thomas as the Signal in a recent story arc. Duke Thomas was portrayed as a metahuman vigilante named Signal in a recent Batman and the Signal comic series. While Duke has always been working to fight crime, he finally gains a superhero status in these comics and is introduced as the Signal. This comic consisted of 3 issues and it focused on Duke as he tried to get rid of the metahumans that were posing as a threat to Gotham. As the comic begins, Duke sits in a room with the entire Bat family and he starts questioning his presence among them. He believes that he does not blend in with other heroes and is only helpful because he alerts the other superheroes about any attacks that will happen in the near future. He also has special photokinetic and umbrakinetic powers that allow him to control light and shadow. While he steps out in Gotham, the Signal faces a metahuman named Null and ends up in a fight with him. He soon realizes that Null's powers lie in specific points on his face and he punches him. While Signal defeats Null, a crowd gathers around and starts blaming him for creating chaos during the daytime. In a different part of the city, Detective Alex Icy switches from the night shift to the day shift to deal with the problem of the metahumans. Commissioner Jim pays her a visit and tells her that these metahumans are connected with something known as the sundial and that it all leads to being known as a Noman. Meanwhile, Duke Thomas returns home and meets some of the members of the Robins movement. He had also gotten into a relationship with Izzy and he shares his concern regarding Null with her. Rico soon joins them and runs an analysis that reveals that Null's powers are reacting to Duke's powers and that they have a connection. The story goes into the past as Duke recollects how Batman reached out to him and showed him around his new secret base, the Hatch. Once again, the comic returns to the present, wherein Rico figures out that all these metahumans reside at the Arkham Juvenile Center. Duke decides to visit the place, but he's unaware that the metahumans leader had set this trap up to capture him. As this issue ends, Detective Icy also decides to visit the Juvenile Center, while the Signal gets cornered by the Null and a few other metahumans waiting for his arrival. The next issue starts with a fight between the Signal and the other metahumans who gang up on Duke and almost kill him. However, he makes it out of the place alive with some help from Detective Icy, who puts a stop to the fighting by showing up at the right time. Meanwhile, the metahumans receive a telepathic message from their leader, who orders them to return to their cells. While Duke does not receive this message, he feels a surge of energy in the room and realizes that this energy is reacting with his cells. He soon returns to his base at the Hatch, where Rico and Izzy are waiting for him to return. Rico even declares that she will no longer be helping him, as she believes Duke is recklessly getting himself into trouble. In the meantime, the metahumans leader watches the scene from afar and is disgusted over the fact that Duke is siding with Batman. The leader seems to have some plans to arrange for Duke to be his dial that controls the energy of all the other metahumans. Eventually, Duke decides to visit Detective Icy at the coroner's office, where she is investigating the death of a meta kid. While Icy is shocked to see Duke appear in the room out of nowhere, she soon recognizes him as the kid who has been wandering around with Batman. Signal states that he can help her with this case, and the detective tells him that this meta kid combusted when his powers activated. She also trusts Duke and hands him a piece of the nth metal they found in the kid's body. Duke carefully observes the metal and realizes it's actually a weaker variation of the nth metal embedded in organic tissue. This metal reacts to a specific form of energy, and Duke deduces that it does not respond to water or radioactive matter. As they try to figure out what could be affecting the metal, Duke realizes that Gotham's sun is the energy source causing these reactions. He observes the Gotham proper city area and realizes that all the buildings have glass panes that filter sunlight and then supercharge the photons to move downwards towards the Narrows. This was all connected to Bruce Wayne's housing project, and they realized that their enemy had managed to use this technology to create a sundial that powers these metahumans. Signal visits Batman and tells him all about this project, and they finally trace these wrongdoings to Noman. In the final issue titled Batman and the Signal versus the Narrows, Noman's metahumans go rampant and stir up trouble all over Gotham. Signal and Batman try to get rid of these metahumans, and they get help from Robin, Rico, Izzy, and Batgirl. While these heroes fight the metahumans on the streets, Batman figures out the Noman's location. Duke and Batman then head to this location, and they notice strange power currents emitting from an antenna in the middle of Gotham Narrows. Duke realizes that he has seen the same thing happen before, and that this antenna must contain some part of 8th metal in it. He deduces that the solar radiation is getting filtered through the 8th metal, and there must be some generator facility nearby that is backing up this entire process. Duke asks Detective Icy to help shut down the area, and they then head to the solar power observatory in Gotham Narrows. Duke comes across Noman inside the observatory, who seems to be waiting for them to arrive. Noman then starts talking about his past and mentions that he had a son with a woman named Elaine. Noman also states that he did all of this for his son, while Detective Icy shoots a gun at his head and seemingly kills him. While Duke heads out to turn off the solar energy generator, he wonders if Noman is really his father and if he did all of this for him. In the meantime, Noman gets back on his feet and Detective Icy struggles to capture or kill him. While Noman manages to escape, Duke loses his balance and almost falls off the observatory's terrace. As the comic comes to an end, Batman rescues Duke before he falls to the ground and saves his life. What made Duke Thomas so special? Duke Thomas is a metahuman with altered physiology that allows him to manipulate, absorb, and reform light and shadow. He possesses many photokinetic powers that enable him to manipulate light and darkness, and he gained these powers due to the presence of the nth metal in his bloodstream. Duke could use these powers to detect changes in light and alter his vision to see things that cannot be perceived by the naked eye. He also had ghost vision, which allowed him to see the ghosts of light and thereby perceive events that took place a few minutes into the past. He could also perceive lights that came from beyond dimensions, and he also had the ability to focus his vision on any particular thing without any distance constraints. Duke could also see things at a microscopic level and even possessed X-ray vision, allowing him to see through surfaces. Duke had inherited these powers from his demon father, Noman, which made him a mighty hero and a very special character. Duke's father had once suggested that he possesses infinite blood, which indicates the possibility that he might even be immortal. Besides these powers, Duke was also blessed by the touch of Ishmael, which gave him the ability to perform umbrakinesis. This allowed him to pull shadows towards himself, bend the shape of any shadow as if it were a physical object, and even create shadows out of nowhere. Duke could also travel through these shadows, which helped him move undetected and take his enemies by surprise during a fight. Sometimes, Duke combined his photokinesis and umbrakinesis powers to create a new path with merged light and shadows. These photo-umbrakinesis powers caused the world to stand still while Duke traveled through a path of light and darkness. Besides this, Duke was also quite intelligent, and he was a skilled detective who had a lot of knowledge in various fields, ranging from criminal science to physics and even psychology. He also possessed good leadership skills, and he had the ability to come up with quick solutions to any problems. Duke was also trained in various martial arts, and his enhanced senses enabled him to easily detect his opponent's weaknesses and figure out their next moves. Duke was also great at hand-to-hand combat and skilled in taekwondo. Duke's metahuman origins also amplified his powers over time and even gave him the ability to heal any injuries or wounds rapidly. Conclusion. To sum it up, Duke Thomas was one of Batman's most underrated sidekicks, and he has a wide range of powers and abilities that make him a very useful character. Duke has been a part of many comic book arcs wherein he plays various roles ranging from a Robin to the powerful Signal, but he has hardly appeared in any DC movies or TV series. He surely has a lot of potential, and we hope to see more of his character in the DC animated universe as well as the mainstream universe. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.